Welcome to Political Personalities with Sky, the only political talk show that pushes politics aside to get to the heart of who our public officials are as humans. Tonight, for the first time on camera since the weeks-long storm of reports questioning who he is, we are joined by Congressman-elect George Santos. Tons of reporting about you, George, over the last week, labeling you as the Anna Delvey of Congress, but I'm sure you would agree we, as millennials especially, must save democracy by encouraging the public to trust government and our elected officials. And when questions arise about who you are and if you've misled voters, this discourages trust in government and causes people to assume that all politicians lie. As you know, I created this show, Political Personalities with Sky, through City and State as a way to speak candidly with our public officials. And I thank you in advance for being honest with me here, and for the opportunity to hear from you firsthand for the first time on camera since all the reporting over the last week. I have a bunch of questions for you, George. I know we have limited time. I appreciate you being here, and I want to know, how are you feeling right now?
Hey, Sky. So thank you so much for having me. It's a time of year that usually emotions are high, and then you add the weight of the world on your shoulders, and they just become higher. But I'm doing well. Granted the circumstances, and I appreciate you asking. But I guess, we need to just address the issues head on in life. And as you said, millennials are going to start becoming the bearer of the responsibility of how society moves forward. And it's a big responsibility we carry, whether it's you through reporting or is it me through legislating. I think that we need to all have that discussion with one another and understand that it falls on our shoulders, but also falling on our shoulders is the expectations from the generations prior to us that we're not measuring up, we're not enough, we don't do enough, they label us as the lazy generation almost. So it's quite the interesting time. But I guess let's get to it and talk about what people want to hear.
No, I know. See, there's all this controversy swirling around you, and you said that you had exaggerated your resume a little bit. And I'm wondering what caused you to even feel the need to exaggerate who you are on paper.
We'll start it this way. Look, I didn't outright lie about my work experience. Actually, I'm fairly well-rounded in the financial markets and capital markets. I've been doing it for a very long time. But I'll take you back to the beginning. So I worked as a customer service agent for 6-7 months of my life, or so, 8 maybe, if at some point in 2011, 2012. And I'm not ashamed of it, Sky. But the moment I put that on a resume and I put it out there, elitists like the New York Times like to call blue collar jobs like that odd jobs, because it just doesn't fit their bourgeoisie style lifestyle. So it's those expectations and those negative connotations from elitist organizations such as the New York Times that lead people like me, who I'm very comfortable in saying I come from poverty. I come from a family of absolute nothing, and I've worked really hard to get where I am today. And the reality is yes, I omitted like past employment history that was irrelevant to the role. Although one can argue customer service is pretty important for members of Congress, but I guess they just don't see it that way. And for a poor use of words, maybe instead of explicitly explaining, I worked for Linkbridge Investors as the vice president of the firm, and we were responsible for capital introduction relationships between LPs and GPs via conferences and direct one-on-one connections. So this is where I go. This is where I believe I used a poor use of words, but I did work in the industry for a number of years. I did deliver on those negotiations. I did deliver on those relationships. I did do work with all the institutions I've mentioned prior and more. I mean, I could have just listed, if I was trying to really defraud the people like everybody keeps saying, I could have just listed bigger, just as big names. But, we did work with companies like Deloitte, Blackstone, Equity International, famously founded by Sam Zell. So, I didn't do that. But these are all organizations I've worked with either on the GP side, which is a general partner, or the LP, which is a limited partner. GPs rate looking for money for their funds, LPs allocating money into funds, right? So,
wait, I want to hold on a second because you mentioned, that you think people want to hear bigger names and that's what elitist outlets want to think. But I have spoken to so many elected officials and public servants, and they love telling their rags to riches story. People love hearing that story about someone who made it. So
I mean, I told it the entire campaign. I was a kid from Jackson Heights in the basement who fought hard and worked hard. Now everything that I've ever worked to build on is up in questioning, and that's the very frustrating side. Look,
why don't you take us through your story, of growing up and getting your first job, and how did you make this money that you have? Can you share that story with us, like the personal side?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So, growing up, like I said, 2 nickels to rob, Jackson Heights, Queens. Born and raised there. Born in Elmhurst Hospital. For those saying that I'm not an American citizen, I assure you I am.
Okay.
The bulk of it and the end of it is just growing up wasn't easy. Mom and dad couldn't afford many things. Mom and dad couldn't afford to give me all the nice things and pretty things everyone had, but we made do. We were healthy, we had a roof over our head, and one might argue I ate a little too much. But fast forwarding, always very ambitious. I always wanted more. I always wanted to do more, to be able to give back, to help my mom, to help my dad. And they worked really hard. They did very well for themselves eventually. And then I caught a break for myself, right? I started my first job in 2007 with a company that did import and export of like costume jewelry, sterling silver jewelry, stuff like that. It wasn't my vibe. They gave me like a big sales role at the time so I can work the South American market because I speak Portuguese and English and Spanish fluently. So they said, you're going to be perfect. So, they bet on me. Look, I work hard. I self-taught myself Spanish. I learned Portuguese at home. I understand and pretty well communicate at a very primitive level, but I can do that in Italian. So there's a lot of aspects of my life that I'm able to show resilience and how I grew, right, as a human being. And then I get to these jobs. I didn't like them. Then I started moving on. I worked for companies in various different sectors. At one point, I did do a 7, like I said, ish month gig as a representative for Dish Network. You learn great life skills doing these jobs, and they're not odd jobs. These are honorable, good paying jobs that people sustain their families through. And for the New York Times to diminish it and call it an odd job just shows you the type of preconceived notion that people give to people who work hard, right? So that's where I probably felt in a sense the need to not share that and the need to embellish a little bit my resume, which I regrettably, and in hindsight, and hindsight vision is host 2020, I would have done it differently and just not even bothered. And if anybody asks, like, yeah, life was hard, but here I am. I'm still qualified. I still understand what I'm doing. That nobody can take away from me. So then we move forward. I start working for this this new up and coming company, Linkbridge Investors. I'm offered a vice president role at the company. At the time, I'm like, that's a big role. That's a big title. That's a big job. And I owned the job. I did it, and I did it well for multiple years, and we delivered. And as a result of that, it's a pretty sustainable company today. The CEO does phenomenal work there. And I'm sorry that this story is bringing so much negative attention towards him and anybody who's ever dealt business with me. After leaving Linkbridge, I go to work for a company who used to be one of our clients, Harbor City Capital. As reported, after I left Harbor City Capital, it was reputed as a Ponzi scheme for aspects of the company, not the whole company, but the financial aspect of the company. I was not named a plaintiff of anything. I was never investigated or anything because I had no fiduciary responsibilities. So I'll get to the fun stuff. So then I decide, once I leave Harbor City Capital, to do my second run for office. I'm opening my own shop. I'm going to do my own consulting like I used to do for Linkbridge. And it just worked because I had the relationships and I started making a lot of money. And I fundamentally started building wealth. And I decided I'd invest in my race for Congress. There's nothing wrong with that. No criminal conduct, no anything of the sort. And you know what? Look, at the end of the day, I campaigned on issues and I campaigned to deliver results. Those promises still stand. For everybody who's ever interacted with me, if I tell you I'm going to do something, I do it. I've never, ever not done something I said I'd set out to do. Did I embellish my resume? Yes, I did. And I'm sorry. And it shouldn't be done. And there's words can't express 100% how I feel. But I'm still the same guy. I'm not a fraud. I'm not a cartoon character. I'm not some mythical creature that was invented. I'm no Russian puppet. I mean, for crying out loud, Putin could really go pound sand right now and or be dug under it. I don't care. Like I said, I am not all these horrific things that are being said about me. Now, the one thing I will say is I'm sorry for having had a life, for having had a complicated life. Oh, maybe I married. Yeah, I did marry young, and I married a young woman at the time, and we pretty much were in love, and then we weren't, because guess what? I decided after a long time, like many who don't, to come out and say, I'm gay and I'm not going to lead you along, and this is toxic and this relationship isn't going to work. And I set myself free and I set her free. That doesn't always work well, Sky.
Right.
Like nobody's going to be like, oh, okay, we were married for so long and now you're gay. How? We're going to be best friends. You can do my hair now. No, it didn't end that way. Hence the very dragged, long out time to get a divorce finalized. But at least I had the courage to do it. Versus so many people who live in denial for their entire life, or frustrated and then eventually become a trans woman in their 60s. It's not like we haven't seen that happen before either. So the reality is I'm human, I'm flawed, I'm not perfect, but I challenge all 434 members of Congress, aside myself, in the House, to go through the same litany test I just went through last week. Open yourselves up to the media. Let them dig deep and pull in your deepest secrets. If we did that, we wouldn't have a single congressman in the House. And I bet you we wouldn't have a single senator in the Senate. Life is complicated. We're flawed human beings. That's what it boils down to.
So, George, how do you think your constituents are feeling right now?
I can't answer that because I don't know. I have people who have reached out to me and given me the utmost support. I have people who have reached out to me frustrated with the reports and wanting to know more. And I have been giving the same explanation to people one-off for the last couple of days. I was silent to the media because I don't dance to the tune of the New York Times or whichever MSNBC or whoever. I dance to the tunes of my constituents. So I've been very heavily, intensively on the phone, talking to them, calling them, making sure people who volunteered. And it's been an overwhelming response of, George, we elected you to get a job done. We didn't care what your resume looked like. Quite frankly, I had a couple of people say, I never even knew there was a resume section of your website. Like, I'm not saying I'm not making excuses here. I'm just sharing to you exactly what the political article said, who called me the Mr. Ripley, and my constituents couldn't really care less because they all went on the record. I think they spoke to 10 and 9 or 8 or 7 out of 10. I don't remember the number. So many things are being thrown at me, so I don't want to quote anything, so I don't misquote something. And then they say, look at him, he's lying again, or whatever. So in the essence of not making a mistake on a quote, on the political article, there were people saying, I'm a lifelong Democrat. I voted for Santos, even if everything in this report is true, I'll vote for him again. You know why? Because I campaign on the issues. I live these issues, just like your family who lives in the district, Sky. We all know what's going on in the district and we know what has to be done. So that's what I ran on. I apologize if anybody feels hurt or betrayed. I will gain everybody's trust back by just delivering results for them and making sure they do not forget why they voted for me in the first place, which was to get stuff done. I will be an effective member of Congress. I will be a diligent member of Congress, and I will be able to deliver results for Congress for the people of New York's 3rd District, because I'm not going to allow this to deter me from doing that. Unlike many who resign, I'm not resigning. I have to leave Congress, Guy. It's going to be by a pink slip by the voters, November of 2024.
Okay. I mean, that's a good attitude to have. I have a few other questions that maybe we can address really quick about property that you own, George. Do you own property? Do you not?
So George Santos, me personally, I've never claimed to own property myself. So no, I do not own property. I've never purchased property under my name, ever.
But your family property, I think at
My
one point.
family has property and I'm able to use of their property, and I help them out with, keeping the books and stuff like that. But that's a family affair.
Right. So that wouldn't have to be on your financial disclosure form when you run for
No,
office.
it's not my property.
Okay. Okay. And your animal rescue charity. I know even you've shared with me personally about all the pets that you've rescued. What happened with that? How did that come to?
So I wasn't the sole owner. Like, I was part of a group of people who founded it, and there was many individuals with various responsibilities. My responsibility was really doing the grunt work. I ended up with finding homes, putting them in my house, finding foster homes, cleaning, whatever amount of dogs versus times 3 worth of poop a day, and then times 6 of pee a day on a bare minimum. That was me. I was the guy picking up poop, cleaning, getting people doing campaigns online. But we had a broader group of folks who helped out, and somebody along the line, and again, this is all stuff that are being looked into to show and get that taken care of, because again, I wasn't alone on this. I never flew solo. I never claimed to fly solo. So that's TBA.
Okay. And the controversy about your ancestors in the Holocaust. How did that become such a story in these different Jewish publications, whether they were in the Holocaust or they weren't in the Holocaust? And do I wish you a happy Hanukkah or a Merry Christmas?
So, as I've said many times, and I think you've heard me say this, I always joke, I'm Catholic, but I'm also Jew-ish, as in ish. And I've made that joke because growing up, I grew up fully aware that my grandparents were Jewish, came from a Jewish family, and they were refugees to Brazil. And that was always the story I grew up with, and I've always known it very well. And I've told it the way it was told to me. Now, if it just strikes me so odd that people are rushing to disinherit me from being Jewish, or for even allowing to care for Israel and Judaism in a time and era where anti-Semitism is at an all-time rise. And here's somebody who actually cares about Jews, cares about Israel, and somebody who's willing to fight for them. And we have people pushing me away. I got a text from somebody today who says, George, I don't care what they say, you're still an MOT. And I'm sure you know what an MOT is. Member of the tribe.
Oh, member of the tribe.
Yeah. So I still got a text like that today, and it feels good, because even though I've always said I'm Catholic, I grew up Catholic, I've always loved and had a deep respect for my Jewish heritage, and I will continue to, and I will continue to deliver, and I will continue to advocate to stop anti-Semitism. I just wish, Skye, I really wish, putting political parties aside, I'm not a criminal. I committed absolutely no crimes. I'm not a wanted criminal in any jurisdiction. And I will say this to you, I don't wish this upon anyone, but I really wish we held people who sold this country out and put national security on the line. I wish we'd put them under the same amount of scrutiny over somebody who literally put a little bit of fluff in their resume.
I know. I'm sure it's been a hell of a week for you. Seriously.
Well, look, I'll share this with you. On the 22nd would have been my mother's 60th birthday. On the 23rd, it was her 6th-year death anniversary. And then I had Christmas Eve, Christmas Day. It's just not that time of year that, for me, it's become kind of not the time of year I enjoy the most. Unlike when I was a kid, it used to be my favorite time of year. So it was quite the week, but I'm ready. Look, you can beat me, but you can't break me. Don't they say sticks and stones break your bones? But
yeah, but names will never hurt you. Hey, this is a good test going into Congress, and that is the plan.
The gauntlet.
Turn in, go do your job, right?
Look, I've gone through the gauntlet over the last week, and I brought it upon myself, and now it's just put your big boy pants on and get out there and get the job done. Like I said, this will not deter me from being an effective member of the United States Congress in the 118th session.
So now that you have this huge media platform, right, George, more people know who you are than ever before. What will you do now that your voice is being amplified so much further?
Oh, I'm apparently, if I tweet now, it becomes breaking news on every news outlet. So I'm going to use that every time I want to present a bill, and I want to see how interested they will remain on breaking every single tweet I do, especially when I get back to DC and I start running on those issues and started like, hey, for all of you who like to break news of all my tweets, this is a bill I'm introducing today for public safety. Can we get that same excitement around it? Because look, like I've said to you before, one of the first calls I made when I got elected was to folks around Mayor Adams because I want a sit down with him. I want to resolve the issues on crime in New York City. And I'm going to make him work with me so we can get that done. We're going to bring back the plainclothes units, the anti-crime task force to the NYPD. I will hustle my way to bring the millions of dollars that it takes, because that will stop crime in the city and it will stop the seepage of crime into the North Shore of Nassau County. So it is an issue that transcends my entire district. So that will happen. And that's the kind of work I committed to do. And Mayor Adams, I don't care if he's in Jamaica having a vacation right now, but when you come back and I'm sworn in, buckle up because we're going to get to work. That's part of the gig.
And George, there are a lot of people out there, I'm sure, that want this all to sort of brush to the side and let you go do your job in Congress and meet with the mayor and solve the crime issues. But are there people, I'm sure there are, what do you say to them that are going to hold this against you and say that they can't trust you because of these exaggerations that you've made?
They were able to trust worse people. They were able to trust Andrew Cuomo, who sexually harassed women throughout his entire career. They were able to trust Tish James, who harbored a sexual predator as her chief of staff. They were able to trust a litany of politicians in this country who have literally sold this country out. Look at the president of the United States. So guess what? I will make them trust me by delivering results. I'm not here for self-empowerment, self-grandeur. I'm just here to get stuff done because I want to leave a country better off to the next generation than when I found it. And that's what I'm going to fight for. And I will have to work now double as hard to earn people's trust back. But I'm confident and I'm sure that I'll be able to do that just by outworking everybody, which is something that nobody can beat me at. Is I am a workhorse at the end of the day. I worked my way into a good career by working 16, 18-hour days. Sleep was optional and it remains optional. It remained optional throughout the campaign and it will remain optional throughout this entire 2 years that I have ahead of me. And if I'm given the awesome opportunity and people trust me to send me back for another 2 years, that's going to be determined in November of 2024. But until then, I remain at the service of the people of the 3rd Congressional District, and I look very much forward to serving them, Scott.
And that's my last question about the promises that you can make us moving forward.
Well, the promises are the same. I'm going to fight to fight crime through federal earmarks and bringing those federal dollars back to the district for projects. So a project being reinstate the criminal task force of the NYPD, or through bringing federal dollars to decontaminate the plumes in our district, or to fix the waterways of the Long Island Sound, which are extremely polluted, and we need to work towards reducing pollution there. So, and there's seepage from sewage and so much issues of infrastructure. Look, one of my biggest pet projects that I really hope I can get it done, and this is something that I've advocated for a long time, is to finally give the much needed electrical grid infrastructure issues that we have on Long Island. Right. We have the worst electrical grid infrastructure on the North Shore of Nassau County. I think it's time somebody really makes it happen and we can bury those lines and give people reliability throughout the storm seasons that we have. And lastly, when I can't talk about public safety if I don't talk about certain neighborhoods of the district. If you look, for instance, at Old Westbury, or if you look at Kings Point, or if you look at Woodbury, or if you look at Glen Cove, these are areas being affected exponentially by crime. These are areas that I hear the bulk of the crime activity happening through burglaries and break-ins, and it's unacceptable. These people equally are paying some of the highest property taxes and federal income taxes in the nation, and they're still not receiving the proper services that they pay for. So we need to bring back funding to these localities so they can expand their policing in their villages and their towns and hamlets. It's so complicated because it's so many levels of government locally that we have. But I can do that by bringing home and repatriating their federal dollars back to them. So these are things that I'm going to work towards. These are things that I'm going to work for, and education reform to make sure that we hold the teachers union and specifically Randy Weingartner accountable for what she did to kids during the lockdowns and deprived them from educations. Because now look at what we're seeing. We're seeing record low test scores and record low grading scores. So we need to fix that too. But aside from that, I just want to say this one last time in closing, Skye, thank you for what you do. Thank you for your style of journalism. And thank you for just being so gracious and always giving everybody an equal platform to speak their mind. And I want to thank City and State for making sure that for giving you that platform. But I also want to thank all the folks who voted for me. And I want you to understand it's not over. I am not resigning. I am getting sworn in, and I will get the job done for you. That's what you elected me to do. I'm sorry for the headaches, but life now moves forward, and we will have a good 2 years. And I make you a promise of that. Thank you so much, Skye.
Thank you, George. I really appreciate it. And thanks for the compliment. And since your tweets go viral, I hope that you'll tweet that you were on my show with me to share your story.
You get ratio, not viral, but sure. Thank you, Skye. You're the
Thank
best.
you, George.